but I'd like you to talk about this a bit. You know, first off, and you've been in the business for quite a while.
Actually, still in it.
And you're still in it, but
Yeah.
you're officially retired too, right?
Yeah, right.
Talk about some of the changes that you've seen, you know, from when you started to what you see today, and do those changes really matter?
Oh. Well, are you running?
We're running.
Well, it's been just incredible changes. I mean, I don't think I would want to even try to start out in the business today. I mean, I'm not sure I would have near the fun that I had. I mean, back when I got in 1960, I started with the Milwaukee Journal. And back then, newspapers were it. I mean, there were no other, I don't know, news magazines, but news magazines I gave up on a long time ago because everything in them reads like an editorial. And they do some original reporting, but not a whole lot. I mean, but newspapers were the be-all and end-all of journalism, and did all the original reporting, and everybody else fed off of it. The television stations fed off of it, the radio stations fed off of it. Back at the Milwaukee Journal, we owned the #1 radio station, #1 TV station in town. And we, as reporters, we had to spike a carbon of our stories, you know, for the AP and also for the radio and television stations. Of course, we didn't. I mean, we were threatened with mayhem if we ever did, because it didn't get on the air anywhere until it appeared in the Milwaukee Journal.
Right.
And the old saying was that it's not news until it appears in the Milwaukee Journal. That's the way it worked. And you know, and all of that has totally changed. I mean, now you have, you know, now you've got the internet, you've got cable television, you've got a 24-hour news cycle, and basically local television that does nothing but cover crime, traffic, and what's the third? There's three things. Crime and traffic and weather. That's right. All you get on local television. They rarely do any original reporting. The only, and it's true today that I think that virtually all of the original reporting is still done by newspapers. Mm-hmm. You know, you've got the entire blogosphere, which I pay zero attention to. There may be, I don't know, maybe some actual bloggers out there who are doing some good, but to me, blogging is little more than institutionalizing the guy in the next bar stool. And there is no great trick to having opinions. Everybody has them. What the real trick is to do what newspapers have always done on the news side, and that's to, you know, that's to do solid reporting, solid investigating, putting out, you know, balancing it as much as possible. If there's 12 sides to the story, try to get that. And play it fair and down the middle. I mean, that doesn't mean, of course, that you're going to be a patsy for anybody, because the best investigative reporters, in my experience, have always been the beat reporters. I mean, they know the people, they know what's going on, and they are the ones who unearth the really good stories. Now, you know, we've seen the whole rise of teams of investigative reporters, and I always remember what Dave Barry used to say about that. He won a Pulitzer Prize one year. So we had him over to the National Press Club, and he said that, you know, he was talking about Pulitzer Prizes. And he said the real problem with Pulitzer Prizes is that we've gotten to the point where the only way to win one is to have teams of reporters. He said, and then of course you have to have teams of editors to edit all that stuff. He said the only real problem is that we don't have teams of readers to read it. So he said, I think what we should do, he said, if a newspaper wants a Pulitzer Prize, it ought to just write a story and put it on page 1 saying it won a Pulitzer Prize. And the truth of the matter is nobody would know the difference. and I think he was probably right about that. I mean, one of a couple of things have always annoyed me about American journalism. One of them is that the people who win those Pulitzer Prizes usually are folks who are in the right place at the right time, or they are, you know, and they get a prize. But a week after they get it, the only people who know they got it are members of their family and close friends, you know, even their colleagues in the news business usually. I mean, I can name a half a dozen Pulitzer Prize winners, but they're people I know personally.
Right.
Do you know somebody else, or SBJ gold medals? I got a gold medal. I bet you there's nobody in this chapter that knows that I won a Sigma Chi gold medal, you know, which is like the next tier down from a Pulitzer Prize. And the other people who win them tend to be people who are infect their stuff with as much opinion as they do news. You know, they write opinion columns or they write commentary of some kind, and you know, sometimes they're pretty good and sometimes they make lots of mistakes too. One of the things that's always annoyed me is that the awards seem to go to the people who are the most opinionated and frequently wrong. But when was the last time that you saw a real good top prize go to a top-notch general assignment or beat reporter who has always played it fair and down the middle? Those people, nobody knows their names, and those are the mainstay of journalism.
Do you see that, and there have been these complaints, that reporters write for the judging panels as opposed to writing, you know, like they want to get a story that would lead to a, you know, to an SDX award, to a Pulitzer, to an appropriate award of some kind.
I don't doubt that there's some of that, but if you look at, I've judged any number of national competitions, and if you look at it, they're going out and they find something in their local community, or they're covering a disaster or whatever, and they just do a bang-up job on it. I don't know how I wouldn't know how to write for a particular prize. I mean, you do know that certain things like, you know, the Worth Bingham Prize in Washington tends to go toward investigative pieces, so you wouldn't want to submit a feature story. And Pulitzer Prizes even. I was a nominee for a Pulitzer one year, and the editor back in Milwaukee who put the stuff together was so enamored with the local coverage that he focused on all the stuff that I did that had local angles. Well, it was stories out of Nicaragua, and I did a lot of big picture things out of Nicaragua as well. And I thought he had submitted all the wrong stories. Now, I probably wouldn't have won anyhow, but in that case, he was tailoring it to what he thought the judges would like, and I think he was wrong in that instance. Right. So, I don't know, but but back to the point about journalism today. You know, the whole idea of this whole convergence thing that people talk about. You know, you go out and cover a story, and you file all day long for the web page, and maybe you put up a blog or two, and then at the tail end of the day, if you work for somebody like Tribune Company, you sit down and get interviewed on television or radio, or maybe you do some commentary on a story that you're basically covering as a reporter, which is probably wrong in the first place. And then at the end of the day, maybe you get time to sit down and write your story, but then you don't have that chance to make that one extra phone call or whatever. One of the best lessons that I ever learned from an old rewrite man who later became a city editor of the Milwaukee Journal was that when you think you are all done reporting a story, take a few extra minutes and make one more phone call, do one more interview, check one more fact. And I can't tell you how many times in 40 years that made a good story better or got my ass out of trouble. It's true. I mean, but do you have time nowadays to do that kind of thing?
Well, that becomes, even without the issue of convergence, you've got shrinking newsrooms, and so where you might have been working on 3 stories over 3 days, and getting a story for each of those 3 days, you now have reporters who have to do 3 stories each day.
Yes.
And so they really can't get that extra call time, and they can't take the time to get that longer perspective as well. And then you just tack this on to the convergence issue. I mean, is this hurting the trust, if you will, or people understanding that we're doing the best we can with what we've got, and we're trying to be honest about it all?
I don't think that the trust thing is probably ever going to happen, and maybe less so in the current climate. It's been my experience that that if you are a newspaper reporter and you try to look at things down the middle, you know, if you're covering on Capitol Hill, you get tagged by a certain number of folks in the political spectrum as being a raving left-wing liberal. Now, I don't know quite how to account for that. I mean, I think perhaps it's because liberal reporters tend to be liberal, but with a lowercase l.
Right.
They tend to be, they get out and they see a lot of people, they smell them, they're in the trenches and so forth, so they tend to be more open-minded and tolerant. Whereas editors and publishers tend to be more conservative with a small c, because they spend most of their time in offices talking to underlings. So there's a difference, and I think that's what helps to balance it out in the end. But in the current climate, people only think things are objective and true if it's something they agree with. And I think that's by and large what the situation is. And it's of course it's not helped by the flat-out irresponsibility of the talking heads on cable television. Mm-hmm. And you know who they are as well as I do. They're right-wing and they're left-wing. And what they do is they basically appeal to people's baser instincts. You know, it's all about me, and I'm getting screwed and so forth. So that and they trash the very things that they get their information from. Mm-hmm. I am absolutely certain that Bill O'Reilly and Glenn Beck and guys like that and Keith Olbermann read the New York Times, mm-hmm. and then they turn around and they trash what they call the lamestream media, you know, or whatever it is. I mean, they turn around and trash the very thing that produces the information that they need in order to do their rants and raves. You know? So I just don't have. I mean, I don't need to get upset. So the truth of the matter is, what I know about stuff like that is stuff I learned from reading the newspapers. I don't actually watch it because all it does is get my gut churning. And I don't need to have my gut churning. So.
A while back, many years ago when I was in Hong Kong, we were talking about trying to explain what journalists do. And it was much more difficult in Hong Kong and in Asia. But I used a line, and the Australian Press Club later stole it for basically their a series of sessions. If we're such great communicators, why can't we explain to the people what we do?
That's a good point, but see, that's kind of not our job, really. I mean,
but if we do it right, we get people to understand the difference between the talking head commentators and the reporters, and what we're, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but what I'm seeing a lot is that you have this blurring, that the people who are reporting the news are tainted by the commentators because the public doesn't see a difference.
Yeah, but it's hard. The problem is it's hard to fight back against that, and that's not your primary responsibility. I am not a public relations man for the news business. You know, maybe we need more public relations men spinning stuff to talk about how good we are, and in fact we do have one really great institution that does that, and that's the Newseum and the Freedom Forum. I mean, anybody who tours the Newseum who doesn't come out of there thinking that news people are absolute heroes hasn't been through the Newseum. So we do have some of that, and there are, you know, most thoughtful people who read newspapers and pay attention have a good idea, but the truth of the matter is when the polls come out, news people come out somewhere beneath members of Congress and lawyers in public esteem. You know?
We actually came out below used car dealers in the last
there
one.
You go. Yeah. So it's it's really our, you know, the old canard about, you know, the job is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. That's really the job, and the job is reporting the news. It's not doing public relations for ourselves. I think we try to do some of that. I mean, I noticed that in the Milwaukee Journal now, they frequently run articles by editors telling how stories were done and how we got to where we were. But we're also doing, I mean, there's still a lot of great journalism being done by daily newspapers. My hope is that eventually they'll figure out the delivery system, whatever it is. But we're still going to need reporters. We're still going to need editors. We're going to still need independent eyes and ears looking at all of these things to, basically keep democracy functioning.
Now, I'd like you to just talk a little bit about why you've been with the SPJ for so long. Obviously, I'm going to, shorten it up, and it's going to be a promo, on our webpage.
Actually, it's mostly inertia. Yeah.
Well, why did you join? Why did you join?
Well,
once inertia got to me, but what was that first thing that put you into it?
I was a young guy in Marquette University's College of Journalism, and I actually didn't start college until I was 20 years old. I was in the printing trade as an apprentice printer and later a linotype operator. That's how I worked my way through school. And it was just what everybody was doing. We thought of ourselves as real professionals, and we had a lot of disdain as journalists for fraternities. But Sigma Delta Chi was different. It was a professional fraternity. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it forbade hazing and it forbade initiation rites, which we of course went ahead and did anyway. You had to sing a song, and then it was set on fire and doused with beer, and you had to come up with an original thought in 5 seconds. And we did it in the upper room of a tavern in the middle of the inner city in Milwaukee. But then I just continued with it over the years and paid my dues. I now wish that when they had offered me a lifetime membership for about $100, but way back then I had taken it, but I didn't, so I've been having to pay every year. And then after I came to Washington, there was a pretty vital professional chapter, and so I joined that, and I eventually served a couple of years on the board. Got elected to that, and I don't remember whether we did anything of note. I think that, it's been for me a professional affiliation, kind of like the National Press Club or the Milwaukee Press Club, and I just felt that I ought to be contributing. I always admired the Sigma Delta Chi's and the SPJ's, all the things that they did, even though I didn't participate in them, and for the freedom of information stuff. And looking out for folks, not quite as much as, say, the Committee to Protect Journalists, but it was a good professional organization, and it really was the only one that was of a national nature. I have to say, though, that over the years, to be brutally honest about it, I have been often appalled at the lack of professionalism among some of the SPJ members. I mean, it's like some of them can't put their shoes on right. I have had personal experiences where I've handed pieces of information to people, and then when it appears, it's totally screwed up. Mistakes written into things where the information was right there.
Well, I remember you called me on one thing, because at one point in the newsletter I wrote about thanks to the National Press Club for space. You said,
oh, well, there's an example of one.
Get it straight,
Yeah, I'm trying not to be personal about this, but I mean that there were even biographical information. When I got in the Hall of Fame, I sent in a whole bunch of stuff. They said, "Oh, we need all your biographical information." When it came out in the newsletter, I said, "Wait a minute, that wasn't even in there." So there have been times where, on an individual level, and I don't want to personalize it, but it's kind of like the gang that can't shoot straight sometimes. But on the other hand, there's an awful lot of people who spend an awful lot of time and effort and personal effort for no pay and no recognition, who are doing all the good stuff that SPJ does. So that's why I've stuck it out as a member. Plus, it's 54 years, it's kind of habit for me.
Now, you served, you reported out of Nicaragua, right, and some other...
I did, a whole bunch of stuff, yeah.
Now, what's your view of the way the American media have handled international reporting?
Well, hardly anybody does it anymore, except for very few. The Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNN, of course, is everywhere. But if you want a great example of foreign reporting and this Egyptian stuff, day before yesterday, front page piece by Anthony Shadid on the New York Times. That's as fine a piece as you will read, covering a complicated situation, plugging in all the people, the street people, and all of the issues and things that are going on. The guy is just, I mean, I think he's as good a foreign correspondent as I've ever seen. The guy is just great. And the New York Times still does a superb job. The Washington Post isn't quite as good as it used to be. And probably the Times isn't either. I mean, it's maybe not quite as complete. But a lot of the papers are doing a lot of great other stuff, too. I mean, look at, one of my favorites is PolitiFact, which is, you know, a number of newspapers are hooking up with it. The Journal Sentinel now is hooked up with PolitiFact. And almost on a daily basis on page 2, we either have local reporters holding local politicians and others to the truth, or, you know, it's true, it's partially true, or pants on fire. And then the national folks, I think down in St. Petersburg at the Poynter Institute, they're doing things, you know, on a national basis. So every day we are putting up stuff. I mean, we didn't used to do that years ago. That's one thing that's way better now. And there are, I don't know a whole lot about these foundation-supported outfits that are doing investigative journalism, the former
like ProPublica and like that.
ProPublica, that's the former managing editor of the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
I mean, I've read about some of the stuff they've done. I really haven't read that stuff. But I think that's a good sign, you know, because the papers aren't doing it themselves and don't have the money. But you have to, you have to go to the New York Times, or, you know, maybe The Economist, or a few other, Wall Street Journal, a few other places to find. And CNN does a pretty darn good job too, internationally, although in a television fashion.
Right.
You know, but I think that you know, people, the world is actually smaller. You know, with the internet and everything like that, I think maybe it's possible that people are even better informed on foreign affairs now than they were many years ago.
Okay. See, because I find it just the opposite. That,
oh, really?
Well, you have the New York Times, and you have the big ones that
your wife's involved too, so.
Well, and I've been involved even before
sure.
I married her. I did a lot of international affairs stuff. But you know, we go to Flint, Michigan, and somebody asks us where are you guys living? And we said Hong Kong, and we just pause. That's in Ohio, right? You know. And this was an educated person. This wasn't, you know, just somebody who barely made it out of high school.
Yeah.
I look at the newspaper in Marysville, Ohio, which is ground zero for Toyota or for Honda in the United States, and there are no stories about, even from the wires, about Japan. Now, you would think they would have such things. So nobody's making an effort to link, you know, at the local papers. It's at papers much smaller than the Milwaukee Journal. You know, there's hundreds of stories that are possible to make those links, but nobody's taking the effort to do that, and making the world more relevant to the readers not based in Washington, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Let's say you live in Marysville, Ohio, where Honda has a big plant. The concerns there are how many jobs is it producing, are the cars selling, and so forth.
Right.
I don't know that the average person in Marysville really, does he need to know that the Japanese economy has been on the ropes for 10 years and they've had 3 prime ministers in the last, you know. But
you put a bit of the information. You don't have to do it.
But also you have to talk about the news outlets there. I mean, I don't know what newspaper is in Marysville, but I bet you it's not a very big one.
No, it's not.
Many resources.
Right.
And they probably get the wires, and I imagine they do get stuff like that. And I guess if I were the editor of that paper, I would emphasize things having to do with Honda and perhaps Japan. But, you know, the truth of the matter is a lot of smaller daily newspapers are really pretty crappy. I mean, they don't, you know, they use a few wire stories. Some of them are great on local news, but you don't get a lot of national, international news. on medium-sized and small dailies. It's
And
just kind of
Washington
fact
is a
of life.
foreign country for many of them.
Yeah, well, sure. Well, that used to be my complaint, even working for the Milwaukee Journal in Washington. You could always sell a story about malfeasance or misfeasance or what I used to call cheap shot stories. You could write a story about all the perks that congressmen get, you know.
Right.
They get free paintings to hang on their wall. They get free flower vases. They get a parking space. Well, it's the kind of stuff that any corporation would do.
Right.
But you try to get through a piece sometime on what a crappy job being a congressman is. Like the long hours, the lack of control over your own life, the fact that you have to go home every weekend and get an earful and travel around and so forth. Those stories are very hard to sell because of the sort of provincialism of the people out in Milwaukee or the Midwest or wherever who do think that Washington is another country. You know, I mean, it's just a kind of a fact of life. I mean, you kind of plug away at it, but I mean, the real big problem is that, you know, not very many people read newspapers anymore.
Yeah.
And the worst of them to me, are the ones who criticize. I mean, I've always said that the two greatest critics of newspapers are people who work for them and people who don't read them. I mean, you could sit down, people will, you know, they'll mouth something they heard from the guy in the next bar stool again, and the newspapers are crappy, all you guys do is emphasize the negative and this, that, and the other thing. And the New York Times is a liberal rag, and you say, do you read any of these papers? Well, no, but, you know, you say, well, how the hell do you know what you're talking about? You know, I mean, this goes on all the time.
Exactly.
Now, sometimes it's politically based, you know, and they're getting it from the talking heads on television who are criticizing the quote lamestream media,
Right.
You know, that they get their information from. But I don't know,
Well, it looks like the party is getting ready to start.
yeah,
Is there
so
anything
Sam,
else you'd like to?
No, I
toss
mean,
out?
in fact, I just got a thing today. I did an oral history project thing with the Wisconsin State Historical Society, and I was interviewed 2 years ago by a woman who was doing an oral history of Senator William Proxmire.
Okay.
And she did about a 2-hour interview. And today she sent me. Today I got this whole package, a CD with the unedited interview, a transcript of the interview, a biography, a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to go into the archives.
Cool.
For the Proxmire thing. So yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. She did a very professional job, and only one mistake in the biog. So, and that's not even a professional journalist.
Well, we'll try to get it right. Thank you very much, Frank.
Okay.
Really appreciate
If
it.
you need any, I should mention.